Do think I'm live on YouTube. So, hello, wonderful people of the internet. Welcome back to another episode of Leo Slabs. I hope everyone's having a great day. So today, I want to have a brief discussion about some stuff I've just been thinking about in my head over the past weekend, and honestly over the past year or two, about publishing, specifically self versus traditional publishing. So, as many of you guys know, I've been writing a book in the background. I've been writing a whole bunch of books in the background. In fact, I've been doing this my entire life, yet I've never really gotten to the publishing stage. A lot of this was because when I was younger, and I was writing really, really heavily, well, there wasn't really the option to do self-publishing in the way that there is now. I had books back then about like indie publishing and all that kind of stuff, but I just never did it, you know? But nowadays, self-publishing is something that a whole bunch of people do, and it's a much easier way to get your book out into the hands of readers as fast as possible. So let's go ahead and just take a second, open up Zernal PP, and let's start talking about what it is, like what self-publishing is, what traditional publishing is, and all that kind of stuff. And I actually think the best place to start is just to go to Google right now, and let's go to Amazon.com. And we're going to go to the book section, and we're going to talk about what it means to publish a book. Are all the books you write fiction? No, so I write fiction, nonfiction, basically whatever. A lot of the books I have been writing are fiction, and the one that I'm most interested in publishing is fiction. But obviously, I've written a bunch of scientific papers. I have, I've been really wanting to publish the Algorithm Archive as well, stuff like this, you know. Okay, so let's take a look at these books. Basically, all of these books here are books that are listed on Amazon, right? That we can say. But it is not very clear whether these books are self-published or traditional published. To know the difference, and even to explain what the difference is, a self-published book is a book that is published by yourself. It is someone, as someone who is not a part of a traditional publishing company. So if we go to the big 5 publishers, right? I misspelled that, but I'm sure people know what I'm talking about. Like, we have Penguin Random House, we have HarperCollins, we have Simon & Schuster. Actually, I don't know how to pronounce that one. But these are really, really big publishers that pretty much everybody knows. If you're in fantasy and fiction, you probably know Tor, because this is where, like, Wheel of Time, a lot of Brandon Sanderson is published. This is another very big publisher. So if you go with these big publishers and you go through their system, that is called traditional publishing. If you've just decided to list your book on Amazon, which you can do, and we'll talk about how to do that in a little bit, then that book may or may not be traditionally published, right? Will you check the whisper I sent you on Twitch real quick? Penguin, it was actually suing versus AI scraping. Wait, what does that mean? What was happening with the AI scraping? You sent me a whisper on Twitch. Oh, thanks for letting me know that. Let me see. Is it actually available? It's probably okay. Yeah, it's probably okay. I'll leave it up, but thank you for letting me know that. There's a little bit of a leaking issue there, but I think it's probably okay. So what was going on with Penguin and the AI scraping? So I don't actually know what's going on. They're being aggressive and getting input for all of this stuff. What are they doing? What does Penguin need AI for? Copyright law. So wait. So are they... What are they suing for? Are they suing against AI or for AI? Because if they're suing against AI, I totally understand. Like, that makes a lot of sense. But if they're suing to allow for scraping of their work, that's maybe a little bit weird. Against. Okay, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, to be fair, I really think that... I think most people feel that it is not okay to have non-human entities profit off of copywritten work. I think that is a safe statement to say. And I think it is one of those things that will become more and more like, I don't know, actually, a discussion about AI and copyright is like something I want to talk about, and I think we will talk about in the near future. But for now, I want to table it just a little bit because there's a lot of discussion here that we could have. And it's quite sticky, but we should have that conversation at some point. I know nothing about book publishing. Could using a small publisher be better than self-published? Yeah, so we can talk about that. So let's talk about what the differences are and like how this happens. So let's go to Zernal PP. And let's talk about traditional versus self-publishing. And then over here we'll have self-publishing. All right, so how does this work? Like, what is traditional publishing? What is self-publishing? So first let's talk about the traditional route, because I think even though a lot of people probably have read books, I would imagine people here have at least read one book in their life. and that book is probably published through a traditional media, it's unlikely that most people here understand all the stuff that goes into publishing, right? So traditional publishing, what happens? 1, you write a book. Great. 2, you find an agent, right? 3, that agent finds you a publisher. The publisher fixes your book, and we'll talk about what that means in a second. And 5, the publisher markets your book. And then 6, the publisher distributes your book. Okay, so let's talk about what all this means, right? One step at a time, right? So first of all, you write a book. I think everyone knows what that means. You sit down, you have your pen and paper, you've got your keyboard, you have whatever it is that you write with, you write a book. Could be a short novel, could be a bunch of short stories put together, could be some poems, I don't know what it is, but you wrote something that you want to publish and you want people to see this thing, right? Step 2, you find an agent. Now, step 2 did not used to absolutely, was not absolutely necessary back in the past, right? But nowadays, because there are so many people writing books and so many people who want to publish those books, most big publishers will not talk to you unless you have an agent, right? So you go to the agent. Now, just for the record, in case anybody here is wondering or wants to traditionally publish, if your agent is asking you for money, you should run, right? Because the way the agents work is they will take something like 6 to 10%. I think it's like between 5 and 10% of the amount of money that you're making off of the book, right? And so if they're charging you money, like they say, hey, give me $1,000, then they're already kind of working in this weird, it's more than likely a scam, right? They make money after the book is published and after you start making money. That is how agents work. If they charge you money up front, it's probably because they're not actually going to try to sell your book to publishers, or at least not do as good of a job as they could. Because why would they? They already got their money up front, right? Long story short, you need an agent. They actually do help you a lot because their goal is to get your book published. They don't get paid unless your book is published, right? And so what they do is they will go through and they'll read the book. They'll try to figure out little bits and pieces that you could improve to make the book more sellable, right? Because that's their goal. They want this book to sell as many copies as possible, right? So already we're at this kind of like crossroads between you as the author and your like intent with the book and the ability to sell that book, right? At the end of the day, you need to kind of like play, these are two opposing forces that sometimes work together and sometimes don't, right? So if you're writing a lot of like literary fiction that's whole point is to explore like key ideas and concepts, it could be that literary fiction book does not have very sellable attributes, right? And so if you want to publish it, you have to find an agent who's willing to work with you and really figure out how to make this book work in the modern publishing landscape. It could be that at this stage, if you're writing a fiction book or something, the agent says, hey, you know what's really hot right now? Climate change. Not just because the world is heating up, but it's a really hot topic that like you should probably maybe mention a little bit in your book. It would be kind of, you're so close to climate change in this discussion already, you should just kind of mention it a little bit here and there. I'm not saying they will do that, but I'm saying that you could imagine slight massaging of your script at this point, right? Then once the agent finds a publisher, there's even more massaging that happens. It's not just editing, it's stuff like figuring out I was gonna say thumbnail. It's not thumbnail. The book cover, getting the ISBN, which is the International Standard Book Number, whatever it is, so that you can actually sell this book in stores. It's all of this kind of stuff. There's a lot of like small details that go into this that you maybe are vaguely aware of, but it just takes a lot of time, and a lot of effort that goes into making that book as marketable as possible, right? Then the publisher markets your book. Now, if you are a first-time author, the marketing that the publisher provides for you is probably not like at the same scale as they would provide to like, let's say Brandon Sanderson or like J.K. Rowling or these type of people who are like big authors in the field. Stephen King? Did I admit? Yeah, Stephen, right? Stephen. Just for some reason King came into my mind, but for some reason Stephen did not. Anyway, like these big authors, man, I'm really like painting myself as someone who doesn't know what he's talking about. A point is, the bigger of an author you are, the more likely they are to market your book. So if your book does particularly well, let's say it sells like 5,000 to 10,000 copies, as a first-time author, This gives the publisher more reason to market your book more, right? They have the tools to get these books out into as many like hands as possible. But because they're publishing so many books, it's not entirely clear which books will be successful and which one will not, right? I'll catch up on chat in just a second. And finally, the last thing we need to talk about is how the publisher distributes your book, right? So this is one of the key differences between traditional and self-publishing. As if you were self-publishing the book without a publisher, right? Then it is very unlikely, just almost near zero likelihood that your book will appear in like Books A Million or Barnes and Nobles or these stores that are very popular in whatever country you're at. It's just not likely going to happen, right? The publisher's main thing that it does, or one of the biggest things that it does, is provide a distribution channel for your book so it can get into the hands of as many people as possible through bookstores. Now, does that matter? Because even if you are self-publishing, you can still print a physical copy. People will still get a physical copy of your book. It's just done online. I don't know. That's up to you. And we can talk about that in a second. Okay, let's talk about self-publishing. I heard a little bit about it. I think about authors getting advances. They might perceive sequels as less risky. Yeah, so this is also the other thing, right? If you are an author, a first-time author, and you say, hey, this is the first book in a trilogy, sometimes publishers like that a little bit more because this means that not only are you writing one book, but you have multiple books that are in the works. That means you're not just a one-time author. The publishers can I guess they can count on you for more writing that will hopefully give them more money, right? Because at the end of the day, the agent, the publisher, everybody, including you, are probably focused on money. So let's talk about the money issue here. So for money, right? I don't remember all the details here, but you are most likely going to get 7% off of your book. Something like 7%. And for hardback books, for paperback, 1 second, 7% paperback, and probably 15% hardback. And I don't remember what it is for ebooks, but I think it's like 15% or something like that. I have to look into this. But the fact is, after all the work that you put into your book to write it and to make it as good of a story as you can get, with traditional publishing, you're only going to get $7 back per book, or 7% back per book, or 15% for hardback. So this means roughly, assuming the book is like $15, you're going to get basically $1 back per book in US dollars. And for hardback, you're probably going to get something like, I think like $3 or $4. Let's say it's $24, 15% of 24. That's going to be 12, I don't know, we'll say like $3 to $4 or something like this, right? So it sounds like you're not making a lot of money, right? Because, you're thinking to yourself, well, I just put out this book. I put a lot of effort into it. I spent potentially years of my time writing this book. And yet at the end of the day, I'm only getting 7% back. And that kind of sucks, right? But you have to remember, your part in this process was step one. The agent working with your book, the publisher working with your book, fixing it, marketing, distributing it. This is all very important stuff, right? And so even though you're only making let's say on average 10% back per book, it doesn't matter too much because, it does matter a lot. But the reason this is kind of more or less fair is because, one, you are getting the largest piece of the pie. 10% back from the book is more than anyone else is making off of that book. But more than that, I mean, if you're thinking to yourself that, it sucks, I only get 15 or 7% back for the book, you're kind of discounting the work that the publisher is putting in to make that book actually successful, right? And that is something you have to keep in mind. If you're self-publishing, you're going without a publisher, you are basically saying that all of this work the publisher is doing is worthless. You don't need any of that work, which is totally not fair. A book without a good marketing campaign is basically dead on arrival. You will not sell that book. What people typically find with traditional publishing, for those who don't have a social media presence, they will sell 9 times as many book as they would if they don't have a publisher, right? So if you just self-publish, you'll sell 9 times as many copies if you do self-publish. So even if you make a larger chunk of the pie when you self-publish, because you're selling more books when you traditionally publish, it ends up being, kind of more lucrative to traditionally publish, depending on how you do it. Now, keep in mind, all of these are barriers, right? You have finding an agent is a barrier. Finding a publisher is a barrier. Publisher fixing the book, the marketing your book, the publishing and distributing books. These are all things that take time, right? So if you want to get your book in front of as many people as possible, as fast as possible, I mean, this process is going to take years, right? Meanwhile, with self-publishing, you can do it in a month or even less if you're, really efficient, So this is kind of what traditional publishing is. So now let's talk about self-publishing, all right? Let me catch up in chat. The bookstores do not actually own the books on the store shelf. They're actually owned by the publisher. Forgot what that's called. Yeah, so okay, we'll talk about that as well for self-publishing. But in general, publishers will give bookstores the books for oh gosh, what's it called? Like they basically sell the books to the bookstores at like 60% of their cost. And then those books will sell on the shelves. So this, by selling for 60%, they allow the bookstores to put like 40% sales or 50% sales on the books without actually losing anything for doing that sale. And that's particularly useful if they need to get rid of inventory. By the way, Logician, hey, I saw you down there. There should be a Drake equation for how many books get published. Yeah, I don't really know for sure. I mean, look, I don't know what the actual, like, it's hard, right? I don't actually know what, like, the, I don't have a statistical analysis on the books that are put out, right? And by extension, how many alien books get published? All right, so let's talk about self-publishing. Step one is the same as in traditional publishing. You write a book. Here's where things get a little bit annoying. You hire an editor. All right. 2, 3, you make a book cover. 4, you market. Well, okay, you list the book on probably, this is one of many, but probably Amazon KDP. I'll talk about what that is in a second. And then 5, you market. All right. And I guess, yeah, I mean, in both cases, you hope it sells. So 1, you write a book. Same as before. You write the book. Yeah, it could be, it doesn't matter what it is. You've written the book. You want to publish it, right? Step 2, you hire an editor. This means that you're putting in money, right? On the order of thousands of dollars for this editor to go through line by line and make sure that your book is good, right? So I'm just going to put some money down here because I think at the end of the day, we do care a little bit about money. So let's say a couple $1,000s for this guy, right? You make a book cover. This is going to cost another maybe $100 to $1,000. So we'll just say roughly $500, right? You list the book on Amazon KDP. This is free, but you do have to pay for the ISBNs. So we'll say maybe another $100 here. In fact, let's just not count that one. And then you market the book. Oh boy, this could be a lot. So let's talk about each step in the process. Hiring an editor, again, I think this is pretty self-explanatory. Getting the book cover, that's self-explanatory. Amazon KDP, what is that? So Amazon KDP is Kindle Direct Publishing. Now, there's a whole bunch of different ways in which you can self-publish, but Kindle Direct Publishing is something called a print-on-demand service, and I'm going to go ahead and put this down here, print-on-demand. What this means is rather than buying like a whole bunch of books in bulk, like having an inventory of books that you just give to Amazon, what you do instead is you say, hey, Amazon, I know you're able to print books. You've been printing books for a while. Basically, every time people click the buy button on my book, you print a book at that time, print it on demand when people need that book, right? What this means is that you can print as many books as you want on the fly, and it's totally fine. There are going to be some issues with quality control because, for example, if someone buys your book in Germany, it's going to be printing from a different printer than those who buy the book in the US, right? That's just going to happen. But for the most part, you can get a physical copy of the book available to anybody you want with Amazon KDP, and it works pretty well. The other thing is Amazon KDP allows you to do Kindle as well. So if people are reading off of ebooks, which I think is like 25% of the market, then you get that for free off of Amazon as well. It's no big deal. You could use other services as well. It doesn't have to be Amazon KDP. It could be like, there's like Lulu, for example. And there's like a whole bunch of others like Ingram Sparks as well. There's a bunch of different platforms that do this. But I think by and large, most people use Amazon KDP because for the most part, if you're buying a book online, you're probably going to be buying it off of Amazon. As much as I hate to support a corporate conglomerate that is Amazon, you know what I mean? It's just very likely that if you are going to if you're going to buy a book, it's probably off of Amazon, probably not off of like barnesandnobles.com or whatever. Lean inventory stuff, but that thing probably needs a paper cover inventory. Yeah, so I'm not entirely sure how that works either, to be honest. I'm not sure like where they keep the inventory for like the book cover and all that kind of stuff. But fact is, as an author, you can do this and it'll work for you. Okay. Let's talk a little bit about money. So for money, you get, I don't remember all the details here, but it's something like 60% off of each book, right? For paperback sales. To be honest, I don't remember like the exact numbers here, but the fact is you make a lot more off of each book sale than you would if you were to do traditional publishing. So for example, if you're selling a paperback book on Amazon, this means you're roughly getting, $5 back per book if you sell the book at $15 at the same price you're selling the paperback book from traditional publishing, right? So that means you're making 5 times as much money off of every book that you sell from self-publishing. The downside being that you get none of the marketing help from the publisher, right? None of it, right? And so you're not selling, in general, you're selling, let's say 9 times less books, but you're making 5 times as much money off of each book. Well, it's a bit of an issue. Are these percentages sale price? No, so it's not sale price. It is 60% off the revenue of the book. So it's after printing. So the book could cost like $5 to print, and then, or maybe like $6 to print. And so if it's a $15 book, sorry, one second, $15 book, then $6 for printing. So we'll do this is equal to, let's say 11 or $9 left. And then you have to multiply that by, let's just do this. 9 times 0.6 is equal to, what is 9 times 0.6, guys? That's going to be something like $5. I'm just going to put a squiggly here and say something like $5. Something like that, right? So that's how the money works here. 4.5. Yeah, something like 4.5 or 5 is about right. Again, these are all rough numbers, right? Over 9,000. Man, you are so good at math, Anakim. I'm so glad you're here. So long story short, it's not very clear what is best for your book, right? Because if you do traditional publishing, you go through an agent, you go through a publisher, and these guys fix your book. They make it more marketable. They fix all the typos. They do everything to make the book a good book that can sell to as many people as possible, right? And they know how to do this, right? They know how to do this because they've been doing it for like 100 years now, So it's one of those things where like the publishers know what they're doing, whereas you as a self-publisher probably don't know what you're doing, right? And so to get that book to sell, it's quite hard. And it all comes down to whether you believe you can actively market your book. Now, keep in mind, the publisher will not market your book unless they're pretty sure the book is going to sell particularly well, right? So if they're not going to market your book with traditional publishing, then maybe it makes sense for you to market the book via self-publishing. You know what I'm trying to say? Like, what I'm trying to say is, when it comes down to it, the only thing that matters in order to get your book in the hands of as many people as possible is how that book is marketed, right? The publisher knows how to market the book, but won't do it unless your book has proven itself to be something that could sell in the first place, right? One story that I think most people know, but some people might not. How do I put this? Let's just talk about the person who sold Harry Potter, right? So what people might not know is that Harry Potter has 2 different publishers. One is Pottermore Publishers for the UK and basically international, and then it has Scholastic inside of the US. Now, Scholastic is a particular publisher. It's not Rowling's. I was thinking about Rowling's agent. Sorry, my brain's not quite working right now. So what I'm trying to say is that the agent decided that this book was probably a pretty good book that could work in particular age ranges, right? Like it could work for children. Children will love this book, right? So what they did is they initially published the book in the UK to get the initial number of sales out there, like a couple thousand sales. And then after that, they then marketed it to Scholastic in the US. By doing this, they proved to the publisher that this book already has legs, so that the publisher could put money in to actually distribute and market the book appropriately, right? It's one of those sales tactics that obviously worked. The book is now like one of the book series is one of the most popular book series is in the world, right? And so in some sense, you have to kind of trick the publishers in this way. You have to prove to them your worth before they're willing to put the money into your into marketing your book, right? But once they do that, because their channels are just way better than your channels and they know what they're doing, in general, you get this 9 times metric. Like they end up being more profitable in the end. Let me go ahead and catch up over here. So, by the way, hey, Marion, how are you? Does it make sense to just publish an ebook? I'm not into that world, but wouldn't people be less willing to buy a document than a physical object? Wouldn't people be... also, piracy seems to be a huge issue. Yeah, so I think a lot of people overplay the piracy issue when it comes to publishing, because at the end of the day, if your book is available at a library, right, it's already free for people to look at, right? I think most people understand that, you can probably get the book available online for free some way, right? Just like you can get anything available for free online somehow. But on the other hand, I think most people are willing to pay for a book. They understand, to read this book, I should buy the book, right? And so I don't think piracy matters too much. But a lot of people do just publish ebooks, right? Because ebooks are particularly popular. If you look at the numbers, it's like 25% of the 25% of the market, I think, is ebooks. So it's good. And also, like, a lot of people, for their first time novel, will just publish it as an ebook. Again, Amazon KDP allows people to print on demand anyway, so it's basically just an ebook, just easier to also get a physical copy as well. And by doing it in this way and allowing your first book to be sold at a really, really low price, it allows you to get your foot in the door so that people become hooked on your writing and they want to buy the next one. You know what I mean? So if you sell that first book essentially for free, then your next book should do well, because a lot of people will buy the first book because it's free. I mean, essentially like maybe $1 or something like this. And after that, people are hooked on your writing, hopefully, and they'll want to buy your next one. It is a sales tactic that's worked for a lot of self-published authors. Do you know the history of Alice in Wonderland? I was a critique of abstract algebra. I don't know the history of Alice in Wonderland. I don't understand how we live in a world where publishers and business people get more money than the actual creator. So for this particular case, when it comes to publishing novels, I think the publisher does put a lot of work in, and I think it is probably fair that they make a certain amount of money. Now, should they make, 85% of the book? Should they make, 93% of the book price? Probably not, but I think it's totally fair that they make a large portion of the pie, because the book would not sell without the distribution network and all this kind of stuff. Now, when it comes to academic publishing, I'm 100% with you, and I think it really sucks how much academic publishers just steal from academics. That's another discussion for another day, and we could definitely talk about that in the future. It should be less than 50%. Yeah, it's quite different though. I mean, like, I would say that giving the author 25% would be fair. That's what I would say. I think. It was a critique. Yeah, Alice in Wonderland was a critique of abstract algebra. That's interesting. If the book is good and a decent price, it won't be worth the trouble of pirating. Sabine H. got some words on academic publishing. Yeah, I don't know what I think about Sabine. So for those who don't know, Sabine Hassendorf, I don't remember her last name, but she is a science communicator who publishes a lot of videos on YouTube. And I don't really know what I think about her as a content creator. It's not that she says a lot of stuff that are 100% true, right? And I'm not trying to say that her lived experience of basically being kicked out of science due to sexism and all this, I'm not saying any of that is wrong. I'm just saying some of the stuff that she says on her YouTube channel in terms of science communication are borderline like conspiracy theory. And I don't know what to think about that, right? But yeah, certainly the discussion of academic publishing is something we should have in another day, right? So when we're talking about traditional self-publishing, bringing us back to that conversation, it's not very clear for you as an author which one you should choose. But I would say this is one of those discussions that I think everybody in the back of their head has when they're starting to write a book. They're thinking to themselves, what should I do? How should I get this book in front of as many people as possible? But the fact is, it doesn't matter, right? Your first step, regardless of whether you self-publish or you traditionally publish, is to write a book. That's it. That's step number one. Everything else on top of that is basically dependent on how much you feel your book will sell, right? Remember, for self-publishing, you get 60% off of each book, but you put a significant amount of money in, on the order of a couple $1,000s. To get a couple $1,000s back, let's say you get $5 back per book, that means you have to make, let's say you have to make $3,000 back. Well, 3,000 divided by $5 per book is going to be equal to, why can't I do math right now? 600 books, right? Am I stupid? 600 sounds right. So you have to sell 600 books, and you might think to yourself, well, 600, like, that's not a large number. Like, surely I can sell 600 books. I mean, J.K. Rowling is over there selling 600 million books. And you're right. It seems like a small number to hit, especially if you're used to YouTube numbers or TikTok numbers or Twitch numbers or any of this kind of stuff. But selling 600 copies of something is significantly difficult, right? So getting beyond the amount of money that you put into the book, like getting beyond the editing costs and book cover costs, is actually probably not super likely unless you have some sort of marketing presence, right? And so that's what it really comes down to. In order to get your book out in front of as many people as possible, the number one thing you have to do is find a way to market that book and to get as many people to buy the book as possible, right? Have you looked at the work of journalists and people like Cory Doctorow on self-publishing? Lots of stories of Amazon stealing from authors by obscuring information from them. Tell me more about that. I want to learn more about that. I've actually never heard of this. Decoding Gurus podcast just did a very good review of her work. Could you give me explain it like I'm five? Like what did they say? Like what were the highlights of that discussion? Okay. I'm going to come back to this discussion between traditional and self-publishing, but if you guys have like questions, comments, concerns, ideas, anything like that you want to talk about, now's a good time to talk about it, right? I'm specifically publishing this as like a separate live stream from my traditional content on YouTube because for the most part, maybe people will find this useful for like a certain group of people. Maybe it's not going to be like the clearest video for like people who want to learn the difference between traditional and self-publishing, but I think it might be worth like having, it should be a standalone video. So that's what this is. I'm probably going to, once this discussion is over, take a step back and just do some Twitch streaming like off of YouTube and then come back for the quantum discussion in just a bit. Okay. So now let's talk about numbers one more time by going back to Amazon. I'm going to click Amazon Editor's top 20 books for 2024. I'm going to click these guys right here, all of the top ones. And we're going to see, are they traditional or self-published, right? This one, Random House, LLC, Big 5 publisher. Penguin Group, top 5 publisher. Random House, LLC, top 5 publisher. That's also Penguin, by the way. Macmillan, again, top 5 publisher. Penguin Group, top 5 publisher. Random House, LLC, top 5 publisher. So all of these, almost all of these were Penguin, Penguin Random House. Okay, so let's take a look at top picks for you. One. Okay, I don't know why Plant U is number one here. Let's see. So this one is, let's go down to publisher. Am I able to find buying options, similar titles? I just want this. Okay, Plant U. This one sounds like something that could be self-published, right? So let's see, international free shipping. Let's see if we can find a publisher, about the publisher. It might be self-published. It's actually not easy to see. Publisher is, Hachette Go. Okay, so it is separately published, right? But this is my point. Like pretty much all of these books that you see here, right? Whether because they have benefited from traditional publishing is what I want to say. By that, I mean, they have, because they have been traditionally published, a lot of these books have been traditionally published, they get more marketing to get them off the ground and to really go as fast as possible. And that bumps them up in the Amazon algorithm. It bumps them up pretty much in any algorithm. It gets more people to read it, and that means that the books are more likely to sell more copies, right? But this is traditionally how it works in pretty much every field, right? Like if you have that initial seed of people to buy your book, and those people really like the book, then eventually it's picked up in other groups by other people, you know? So long story short, even on Amazon, where you can directly publish via KDP, it's more than likely the books that you're finding are traditionally published, right? Okay, so apparently the only thing I bought on my US account is like either comics like Gwenpool or like Robert Jordan and Wheel of Time stuff, because these are like the worst recommendations I've ever seen. But that's okay. It's fine. That's totally fair. I want to ask more about Sabine. Should I save it for another stream? I think, yeah, we'll talk about that in just a bit. I think it's really good to talk about. Dakota said basically Sabine mostly sticks to science-based criticism, but leans too much on to just asking question cranks, possibly due to chasing that algorithm. Actually, in fact, how about right after this discussion, we go ahead and start up the quantum discussion? Like, I'll start that discussion early. I was going to start it at 2:00 p.m., but I can start that a little bit early, and we can talk about all the science communication discussion like immediately after this stream. I'm happy to start the analog quantum discussion a little bit early. Okay, so these are my rough thoughts on traditional versus self-publishing. The fact is, nowadays, it really does depend on your book as to whether you should or should not self-publish or traditionally publish. But probably you're going to sell way more copies traditionally publishing, and probably you're going to have a way better book at the end by traditionally publishing, right? If you have a very clear vision of what you want your book to look like at the end of the day, then it makes sense to go self-publishing. If you have the ability to market your own book and sell it to your own crowd of people, then go self-publishing. If you have if you're pretty sure the publisher is not going to go for your book for some reason, then do self-publishing. Basically, it almost always makes sense to try traditional publishing first before doing self-publishing, even though you make a significant less amount of money. Like you're making, only like 7 to 10% versus 60% per book. Those numbers are highly dependent on the individual, right? So let's just talk about numbers here as well. So 50% of all book sales are done online right now, right? So if 50% of all book sales are done online and your book can only be purchased online, then you've already cut your audience by a factor of 2 by doing Amazon KDP as opposed to doing a traditional publishing route, right? So if you're already working with half the number of people, then that initial seed of people who are going to like your book is much smaller, right? It means you're going to get less reviews, you're going to get less everything, right? And so it means that you're less likely to be picked up by the algorithm. And then it just gets worse from there, right? Because traditional publishers know how to get the book in front of book reviewers. They know how to get the book in front of key people to make sure that book is sold on top shelf in terms of what you go in and you see in the bookstore and stuff like this, right? So what I'm trying to say is it is not impossible to do well self-publishing, right? For example, 50 Shades of Grey, I believe, was self-published. I think it's now traditionally published, though. Actually, let's take a look at that. 50 Shades of Grey. Let me just look at it on Amazon, see what we have here. 50 Shades of Grey. Let's see, what do we have here? So 50 Shades of Grey, let me see if they are... It's a trilogy. Wow, I learned something just now. Paperback, they are... Let's see if we can get information about the publisher, about the author. Actually, it might still be... Bloom Books. Okay. I'm not entirely sure if this is just a random company that the author has created or something, but fact is that it is now apparently published by Bloom Books. It's not one of the big 5 publishers, which is interesting, but 50 Shades of Grey was a phenomenon, it has some of the best writing I've ever seen. For example, 50 Shades of Grey, thumb quote, by far the best writing I've ever seen in any book. Let me see if I can find it for you. So here's a quote from 50 Shades of Grey. Christian Grey put his thumb in my mouth, and then another one, and then 2 more, wider, he said as he put in 1 more. I bet you've never had this many thumbs in your mouth. I hadn't. This writing, every time I read this quote, I'm like, Jesus, what on earth was this person thinking when they wrote this? This person has how many thumbs in their mouth? How do you have that many? Where'd they come from? Where are all these thumbs coming from? Does this person just have or is every finger a thumb? I don't know. But this is the type of genius that will sell, brilliant, millions of copies of a book. You know what I mean? This is so high level that even I, with a PhD in physics and someone who's been writing my entire life, I cannot even grasp how beautiful this writing is, All right. So let's do, we can take a look at pluralistic. Let's do copy link over here, paste there. Self-publishing, how to make money writing short paragraphs. Publishing is doing great. Despite panic at the start of the lockdown, book sales are actually going up during lockdown as people turn to books to pass the time, joining online book clubs and finding ways to support their local indie booksellers. But authorship, not so great. Every part of publishing supply chain has undergone radical concentration over the past 40 years, starting with the consolidation of mass market distribution in the 1990s. Mass market books are produced for sale in non-bookseller channels. For sale in bookstores are called trade books because they're sold through bookselling trade. I don't want to go through this whole article, but I think healthcareification of publishing. The book trade and mass market retail were collapsing even further. Oh, this is actually quite interesting. Oh man, I'd love to go into this more. Advanced marketing services. Wow, okay. First of all, this is a novel in its own right. I'm sure this is 5,000 words. We already have a short story here. Let's see, with all this, you may be tempted to self-publish. After all, the mechanics of self-publishing have never been simpler or more extensive. Lulu will print beautiful books onshore, quickly and cheaply. And of course, Amazon will take your book for the Kindle store, and Ingram will accept it as print-on-demand title available to every bookstore in the country. If you can't beat them, join them. I often hear from friends and strangers who want to know what I think of self-publishing. Here's what I tell them. Publishing a professional quality volume has never been easier. Working with publishing platforms, you can contract with excellent proofers, copy editors, cover artists, book designers, typographers, the whole stack of professional services that go into making a book into a finished project. You can hire as many or as few of these professionals as you need based on the skills you bring to the table. But that still leaves you with a serious problem, perhaps the most serious problem in publishing. All of that stuff is writing and printing. But until the book finds its reader, it is not publishing. As my beloved novel editor Patrick Nielsen Hayden told me long ago, publishing is the process of identifying a work and its audience, and then taking whatever steps are necessary to connect the two. Yeah, I agree with this statement, by the way. That may include cover design, marketing, copy, or copy editing, but it also includes a huge, ill-defined, nebulous world of marketing, sales, and publicity. Right, exactly what I was trying to say before. Like, if you are an author, the number one thing you need to worry about in terms of, how do I put this? A book without a marketing strategy is dead on arrival. I've said that multiple times. I'm going to say that again. You have to find a way to market the book. If you cannot market the book, it will not sell, right? And if it does not sell, people will not read it. And people don't read it, then what's the point in writing? I mean, that's not true. Writing is fun and enjoyable in its own way, but a lot of people find a lot of joy knowing that people will eventually read that book. And this marketing part of the pie, like this marketing discussion is very difficult. It's very hard to market a book well, right? Especially today when everyone's on TikTok and YouTube and Twitch and all these platforms, right? It's very difficult to get them to buy and just focus and read a book. You know what I mean? So with that said, finding a way to market that book is incredibly difficult, right? If you already have a strategy and you already know how to market the book, self-publishing is fine. But if you're kind of new and you don't really know how to do the marketing, going through a traditional channel, at least for your first book, to get that published, and to figure out how they do it is probably worth doing, right? Plus, if you can do traditional publishing, that gives you a little bit of a seal of approval saying that, hey, your writing is good enough to go through a traditional publishing route. It's basically like peer review. If you're used to academic writing, it's basically peer review for your book. And honestly, I think peer review is great, So this is kind of the discussion that you can have. Yes, in principle, you can make more money if you can market your book particularly well with self-publishing. But for the most part, I'm still kind of, in my mind, there's still a lot of advantages to doing traditional publishing, and it should not be discounted, right? Takes longer. People read your book, they'll edit it, they'll review it, they'll make sure it's as good of a book as possible before getting it in the eyes of people or in the hands of people, and that's worthwhile. Okay, I think that's really all the discussion I want to have about self-publishing and traditional publishing. A little bit rambly there at the end, but if you guys have any any comments, questions, concerns, I'll go ahead and catch up on those now, and then we'll move on to the next point of discussion, which will be more about science communication. I've heard sometimes books are sold for the purpose of passing money to the seller. I mean, sometimes that's true, right? Imagine a book that was written by you want to support this person, right? Let's say this person is, how do I put this? They're like, oh, how do I put this? You want to support the person. Let's say it's like Bernie Sanders. You like Bernie Sanders. You don't necessarily want to read their book. You just like this guy. I don't know why I chose a political figure. It's just the person that came to my head, right? In that regard, you're just buying the book for supporting the person, not for actually reading the content of the work, right? And this happens all the time. You'll buy the book because the author is interesting, not because of some other reason, right? Hello, how are you? Yesterday I was in hell, but today I am back home again. I hope everything's going okay. Let's talk a little bit more after the stream is done, or after the YouTube side of the stream is done. GPU, always interested in listening to you talk about that. Yeah, that's fair. Okay, so I think this is where we're going to close the conversation for now. Again, if you guys have any questions, comments, concerns, ideas, anything like that, or you want to talk more about it in the comment section of this particular live stream, feel free to do so. For the record, this is an experiment of mine, just seeing how I want to produce, this particular discussion I was maybe not going to have today. I almost didn't want to I almost didn't want to do the stream. But I decided at the end of the day, this discussion might be worth having for a number of different reasons, if only for my own sanity, just to talk out loud and to think about to talk about what I have to say. But also, it might be worthwhile for other people to hear the differences between traditional and self-publishing and all that kind of stuff. So I thought, okay, I'm going to do a live stream. A little piece of this live stream is different than the rest of the live stream. So how about we just siphon off that piece and turn it into its own live stream that's hosted on YouTube, so people can look at the VOD, whatever, and we can have a discussion there. And then we go back to our normal-ish live streams after this. Extreme example, Gary Vee's book has NFT tied to it. So holders buy massive quantity of it. That's interesting. This whole NFT craze, I'm glad is more or less over. I'm not able to predict what would happen to your subscriber number should you only stream as Leia from now on. Oh, it would go way up. It would go way up. Yes, please activate your community for help offload some tasks. Yeah, it's not exactly what I'm trying to do here. I'm not trying to ask for you guys to help me out with this type of stuff. It's just in my own mind, I need to think about what the actual correct answer is for my book, and it's not very clear to me. Because on the one hand, I want to be as open as possible. I want to involve you guys with the writing of this book. On the other hand, if I do that, I cannot traditionally publish. Because in doing so, the book would already be traditionally published, or not traditionally published, but it is already available for free online for people to watch or to read. And if it's already available online for people to read, then it's kind of already published, and publishers probably don't want to read that, So it's one of those weird situations where most authors don't care. They can just write the book and they can decide about publishing once the book is done. But in my case, because I want to do the writing as openly as possible, I need to make the decision now. Because on the one hand, if I traditionally publish, I need to hide the book from you guys. On the other hand, if I don't go down the traditional route, then I have to do all the marketing. I have to do everything on my own. So it turns into, it's difficult. It's difficult to make the decision. But I think, in my mind, because I want the book to be open, and I want you guys to be involved with the process as much as possible, I'm going to have to go self-publishing, at least for the first book, and just see how it goes. I had to unbox a pack of Jamie Oliver stuff. My hands were in agony and eyes were burning, seeing his face. I don't know, who's Jamie Oliver? Do I know Jamie Oliver? Too much involving us. Wouldn't it skew your writing a little towards something else to some extent? That's true. But, the fact is, when you go through a traditional publishing route, part of the advantage there is the peer review part of it, the editor, the agent, the publisher, all going through the work and making sure it's as good as possible, right? But the advantage of doing it live is that you have a bunch of beta readers, a whole bunch of people, ideally a whole bunch of people, who will look at the book and they'll say, hey, this works, this doesn't, here's why this works, here's why it doesn't. Plus, to be honest, because I'm writing this book in a very weird way, I'm writing it in tetrameter with trisyllabic feet. It's never actually been done before. Maybe it has been done before, but I've never seen a piece of writing that uses the exact meter that I'm using. And especially not at scale, the scale that I want to write this book in. So with all that said, I think it's an interesting thing just to talk about and to stream and to show people how it's done and why it's done this way. And I have to think about each line significant. It takes me a lot of time to think about each line. And because of that, it makes sense for me to just stream the process anyway, because I have a lot of thinking out loud and stuff like that. Okay. Newbie question here. How do I hire an editor? Honestly, you just Google it. You'll find some good editors, but the main thing is if you are self-publishing and you need to hire an editor for your own work, make sure that editor is specialized in the area that you're focusing on, right? There's different linguistic traits. So there's different ways in which you write for romance versus literary fiction versus poetry, right? You just make sure that the editor actually knows what they're talking about in the medium that you're looking for. So in the same way that you find an agent by going through, figuring out what the agent has gotten published before, you go find an editor, see what they've edited before, right? Okay. Why would I have to hide the book? The reason I would have to hide the book if I went traditionally published, if I went through traditional publishing, is because most publishers are a bit leery to publish a book that is already available for people to read online for free, right? My book is technically under CC by NC, what is it? So Creative Commons, attribution, non-commercial, share alike. What this means is the only, you can use the work for anything you want as long as you don't make money off of it, right? And you have to attribute me. And the future work that you're using has to be share alike. So it has to be also Creative Commons, right? CCBN, yeah, I mean, that's what it is, right? Like, unfortunately, it's just a little bit of word salad. Okay, this is where I'm going to go ahead and end the YouTube portion for this live stream. I will come back in like 5 to 10 minutes to have discussions about science communication, analog quantum computing, all of this kind of stuff. Again, if you guys have any questions, comments, concerns, ideas, anything like that, leave it in the YouTube comment section for this particular live stream. And I'll be right back on the next live stream talking about analog quantum computing, and we'll start up that conversation talking about science communication and stuff like that. So I will be right back. All right, so I should have ended that live stream on YouTube. I'm going to go to the bathroom really quick before we start the next discussion.